What if the villains think that they're the hero? From saving their people to fighting for justice, these characters blur the line between hero and villain. Magneto, a central figure in the X-Men universe, he believes that his actions are justified as a means of protecting mutant kind. Eric Lenscher's traumatic past shapes his worldview today. He sees humanity as a threat to mutant survival, citing historical persecution as evidence that humans will never accept those who are different. Magneto's ideology centers on preemptive action, right? Striking before mutants can become victims of human fear and hatred. To him, his aggressive stance is not villainous per se, but a necessity to secure freedom and safety for all mutants. While his methods often lead to conflict, of course, superhero action, Magneto does see himself as a savior fighting for the oppressed and ensuring a future where mutants can survive and also thrive. Number 9. Ozymandias. Adrian Veidt, also known as Ozymandias from Watchmen, is a genius billionaire who takes extreme measures to save humanity. Convinced that the Cold War will escalate into nuclear annihilation, he orchestrates this catastrophic event that takes out millions but unites the world against a common enemy. Ozymandias believes that his morally dubious actions are for the greater good, sacrificing the few to save the many. His intellect and foresight allow him to rationalize his actions, viewing himself as humanity's sole savior. Right? Can't get worse than that. While his methods are horrifying, his intentions are rooted in creating peace and preventing global extinction. But he doesn't quite nail that, does he? Number 8. Dr. Doom. Robert Downey Jr. is back in the Marvel Universe. This time, he's green and mean. Victor Von Doom is a brilliant scientist and the ruler of Latveria. Doom genuinely believes that his intellect and leadership make him the ideal ruler, not just for his nation, but for the entire world. He views himself as the only one capable of bringing order and eliminating chaos, and he's doing it all with a fancy green cape. Despite his ruthless tactics, Doom genuinely cares for his people, providing them with stability and prosperity. He perceives heroes like Reed Richards and the Avengers as obstacles to his vision of this utopian society. Doom's belief in his own superiority blinds him to the destructiveness of his actions, making him a complex villain who thinks that he's saving the world. Something we see often in the Marvel Universe. Number 7. Ra's al Ghul. Leader of the League of Shadows, Ra's al Ghul is committed to restoring ecological balance. He sees humanity's exploitation of natural resources and overpopulation as a threat to Earth's survival. Ra's believes in extreme measures, including wiping out the population. He thinks that this is necessary all to save the planet. To him, he's not a villain, but a steward of nature, willing to make hard choices for the greater good. His clashes with Batman stem from different philosophies. Ra's views Batman as a potential ally who lacks the resolve to take drastic actions for the sake of the world. Number 6. Thanos. The Mad Titan Thanos believes in restoring balance to the universe. But how he does it, it's not so great. Convinced that overpopulation leads to suffering and resource depletion, Thanos sees his plan to eliminate half of all life in the universe as an act of mercy. By using the Infinity Gauntlet, he views himself as sparing civilizations from the brink of collapse. Thanos' logic is cold, but it is calculated, and he genuinely believes that his actions will lead to a universal prosperity. Despite the devastating consequences, Thanos sees himself as a visionary sacrificing everything for the greater good. And he does it all in a snap. Number 5. Killmonger. Eric Killmonger, the antagonist of Black Panther, is a villain whose motivations are deeply rooted in personal pain and a sense of justice. Born in Djaka, Killmonger grew up in the United States after his father's passing, witnessing firsthand the systematic oppression and suffering of Black communities worldwide. Now, when he learns of Wakanda's wealth and this advanced technology, then he becomes enraged that the nation has remained isolated instead of using its power to liberate and empower oppressed people globally. Killmonger's plan is to take the Wakandan throne, rightfully so, and use its resources to arm and lead a global uprising against oppressors. Now, in his mind, he's not a villain at all, but more of a revolutionary, seeking to correct centuries of injustice. His belief that Wakanda's isolationism is selfish and cowardly resonates with many, even though his methods, conquest and violence are quite extreme. He's still trying to do the right thing. Trying to. Number 4. Sinestro. Sinestro, once a Green Lantern and one of the greatest heroes in the Corps, fell from grace due to his belief that fear, not willpower, was actually the key to maintaining order in the universe. As a member of the Green Lantern Corps, Sinestro was renowned for his ability to protect his sector, but his methods started to grow increasingly not great. He believed that true peace could only be achieved through control and the imposition of fear, leading him to create the Sinestro Corps, powered by the yellow light of fear, rather than the green one that we all love. Sinestro genuinely sees himself as a force for good, arguing that the chaos of the universe requires strong leadership and uncompromising discipline. To him, the Green Lantern Corps' reliance on willpower is naive, and it fails to address the underlying fear that drives conflict. His belief in the necessity of fear as a tool for justice puts him at odds, of course, with former allies like Hal Jordan. Number 3. General Zod. General Zod, a Kryptonian military leader, sees himself as a patriot and savior of all of his people. When Krypton faced destruction, Zod advocated for extreme measures to save the planet, including overthrowing its leadership. His rebellion of course failed and he was banished to the Phantom Zone, but his devotion to Krypton remained unshaken. After Krypton's destruction, Zod's focus shifts to rebuilding his own civilization, and when he discovers that Earth exists and his connection to Superman, Kal-El, the son of Krypton, Zod sees the planet as a new home for Kryptonians. He views humanity as an obstacle to his noble mission of restoring his people's greatness. In his mind, conquering Earth isn't an act of villainy at all, but it's actually necessary to ensure Krypton's survival. While his love for Krypton is genuine, his disregard for humanity makes him a destructive force. His clashes with Superman are not just battles of strength, but philosophical debates about the value of life and the ethics of survival. Number 2. The High Evolutionary. The High Evolutionary is a scientist obsessed with creating the perfect species. Through his advanced genetic experiments, he manipulates life forms to accelerate their evolution, believing that he's elevating them to their would-be highest potential. His experiments often involve animal-human hybrids and entire artificial societies, which he governs with strict rules in the name of progress. Now, to the High Evolutionary, his work is not villainous, but a moral imperative. He sees himself as this godlike figure with the responsibility to guide life towards perfection. He often clashes with heroes like the Avengers or the Guardians of the Galaxy, who view his actions as unethical and harmful. Now, despite his grand ambitions, his experiments frequently lead to suffering and destruction, as his perfect creations often rebel or just fail to thrive. Hashtag not so perfect. And finally, number 1, Mysterio. Quentin Beck, better known as Mysterio, is a master illusionist who initially sought fame and recognition as a special effects artist. Now, when his career failed, he turned to crime, using his expertise to create elaborate illusions. Mysterio often viewed himself as misunderstood, believing that society failed to appreciate his genius. In Spider-Man Far From Home, and also its comic inspirations, Mysterio presents himself as a hero, fabricating disasters so that he can come in and save people and then earn the admiration that he craves. He genuinely believes that he is entitled to the fame and respect given to heroes like Spider-Man, even if it means resorting to deception and manipulation.
Number 10. Venom/Eddie Brock. Obviously, Venom/Eddie Brock and Spider-Man have had a turbulent history. Originally, the symbiote that is Venom bonded with Spider-Man first. Well, second if we count the addition of Deadpool. And it was Venom's desire to be bonded with Spidey and his adaptation of some of Spider-Man's abilities that made him such a powerful nemesis once bonded with Eddie Brock. Brock obviously had his own agenda with Spider-Man, blaming him for his downward spiral. But since his introduction in 1984, he has had a change of tune. He and Spidey have teamed up on a few occasions, but lately it seems Venom is really making a change for the better. From the Sony film that depicts him as more anti-hero than villain, to the Venom Inc. Omega storyline that ended with Venom and Brock giving Black Cat a talking to about what it means to be a hero. Number 9. Black Cat. Black Cat has had a complex history with Spider-Man as well. Originally being introduced as a villain who occasionally fought alongside Spider-Man, she has often flip-flopped between good and evil. Although right now she is more crime boss and even once owned the notorious bar with no name, she wasn't always such a bad kitty. During the times when her and Spider-Man have been an item, she was more hero than anything, helping Spidey to take down Doc Ock and Mr. Negative. One could say Spider-Man has a tendency to bring out the hero within her, though I think Spider-Man has the ability to do this for most villains, when given the chance. Most recently in Amazing Spider-Man Volume 5 Issue 10, it seems like Black Cat may be turning things around again, after Peter once revealed his secret identity to her for the first time since it had been wiped from Black Cat's memory in the aftermath of Civil War. Number 8. Kraven. Kraven's heroic moments have been few and far between, this is true. But did you know that he once was dun 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 Spider-Man? Or at least he was posing as Spider-Man. During the 1987 event Kraven's Last Hunt, the villain adopted Spider-Man's identity in an attempt to prove he was better than the hero. Okay, so maybe not the most heroic motive. But he actually made a pretty great Spider-Man. Although his methods were somewhat more violent than his predecessor, he managed to achieve something that Spider-Man struggled with, by single-handedly defeating villain Vermin. However, it was revealed in the comics that Kraven's poison had not killed Spider-Man, but in fact had just been used to put him in a coma, from which he arose 2 weeks later. Kraven confessed his triumph to both Spider-Man, as well as writing it in a suicide note and killing himself. Don't worry though, Kraven was later resurrected by his family and returned to his old antics. What can I say? Hunter's gotta hunt, I guess. Number 7. Rocket Racer. For those that aren't familiar with Rocket Racer, he was introduced to the comics in 1977 as a villain who zoomed around on a rocket-powered skateboard. Pretty cool. Rocket Racer, aka Robert Farrell, has no powers himself but relies on his intellect, building tech that allows him to appear super. Rocket Racer originally turned to a life of heroism after being saved by Spider-Man and returning to school. He eventually joined a crime-fighting group, the Outlaws. During this time he helped Spider-Man and the team defeat both the Magia and Space Phantom. Though he has since flip-flopped back to his life of crime, Rocket Racer has spent enough time doing good that we may very well see him flop back. Perhaps we may even get to see him introduced as a hero in the MCU. Who knows? Number 6. Norman Osborn. I feel like the bigger of a villain you are to Spider-Man, the more potential you have to be touched by his influence. Norman Osborn's Green Goblin has been a long-standing villain to Spidey, but did you know that he was once the leader of the Avengers? Okay, maybe not like quite the Avengers. After the events of Secret Invasion, Norman Osborn brought us the Dark Avengers to help fill the void of the dissolved Avenger team after Earth's mightiest heroes were forced to disband. Not only that, but Osborn also created and helped run Hammer after the dissolution of Fury's S.H.I.E.L.D. Although the team was comprised of villains, he managed to prove that even the vilest villains can still be used to do good. In fact, their willingness to do whatever it took often made them better than their heroic counterparts. Turning Bullseye into a Hawkeye? Sheer genius, Norman. Number 5. Morbius. This living vampire has had a turbulent past when it comes to his experience with heroism. Despite having originally fought Spider-Man when he was introduced, Morbius quickly had a change of heart. Unsurprisingly in my opinion, considering his backstory shows us that he was simply a doctor working toward curing a blood disease and his treatment accidentally made him a vampire. Oops. Since this initial fight, Morbius has been seen fighting alongside the Avengers and Blade. Yep, you heard me right, there are quite a few comics where we see Blade join Morbius. Morbius was even tasked with trying to get Blade to register with S.H.I.E.L.D. under the SRA during the events of Civil War. How cool would it be to see Wesley Snipes cast alongside perhaps someone like Alexander Skarsgård in a Morbius and Blade buddy vampire team-up film? Ooh. Number 4. Prowler. Whether we talk about Earth 1610 Prowler Aaron Davis or Earth 616 Prowler Hobie Brown, both have seemingly had a change of heart. But today let's talk about Hobie Brown. We can save Aaron's story for maybe some, I don't know, some Miles Morales videos. Would anyone be interested in those? Me. Hobie Brown's involvement with crime was short-lived. He never hurt anyone and really was only involved so he could get some quick money and use it to take care of and marry his girlfriend Mindy. Aww. After being caught and spared by Spider-Man, he turns to a life of heroism and vigilante justice. He can often be seen teaming up with Spider-Man and, like Rocket Racer, is also a member of the Outlaws. Not only that, but Hobie often works under the guise of Spider-Man, helping to assist Peter in protecting his secret identity. Number 3. Sandman. Despite being one of the classic Spider-Man villains, Sandman held a long-running stint of heroism in between his criminal escapades, spanning from about 1982 to 1998. It all started when Sandman befriended the Thing and expressed regret for his life of villainy. The Thing took pity on Sandman and decided not to turn him in, hoping Sandman would actually turn things around. I'm noticing a pattern here, wherein heroes believe in the ability for a villain to change their ways, and then it just somehow magically works. Because yes, like other villains, this leap of faith ended up being a worthwhile one. Sandman later actually saves Spider-Man from the Enforcers and even ends up working for the Silver Sable. Sandman was also a member of the team built of former villains, the Outlaws, where he also fought alongside Spider-Man. He has even held probationary status as an Avenger. You know you're doing something right when the Avengers invite you to join up. Number 2. Karn. If you didn't know how much I love the Spider-Verse, my number 2 should be enough to inform you. Karn was originally a member of the Inheritors, a family of energy-feeding vampires who ended up traveling through the multiverse and feeding off of and killing spider totems. What is a spider totem? Some of you may be wondering. Spider totems are alternate spider people from other universes. Think Spider-Ham or Spider-Gwen. Karn was always considered an outcast though, when it came to the Inheritors inheritors and his family. He was often looked down upon. He was in fact killing spider totems, mostly to appease them and be allowed back into the family and return home. After being defeated by a team from the Spider Army, he was offered a truce. The Spider Army wanted Karn to join them and use details they had of the inheritors and his life to try to persuade him. They later revealed that they had received these details from the Master Weaver. After the events of Spider-Verse wherein the Master Weaver perished, it was revealed that the Weaver was actually Karn from the future, and so Karn from the present took his future self's place and completed this weird time loop. As Master Weaver, he worked to help defend the world and spider totems from the inheritors. I love the Spider-Verse. Number 1. Dr. Octopus. Probably the most iconic supervillain out there when it comes to Spider-Man. Doc Ock was of course originally Otto Octavius, a brilliant scientist who eventually transformed into Dr. Octopus, melding with his brilliant robotic arms after being exposed to radiation. Dr. Octopus has had a long history of villainy, mostly influenced by his insanity, mental instability, and obsession with Spider-Man. But akin to Kraven, who I mentioned earlier, Doc Ock has also had his chance at being Spider-Man. Yep, that's right. He assumed this identity after swapping minds with Peter Parker's body, causing Peter to be stuck in old Otto Octavius' body, which was dying. Granted, at least Doc Ock had a better reason. He wanted to be Spider-Man not just to prove he was better, but to actually be better. To be the best Spider-Man and potentially to avoid, dying. After adopting Spider-Man's identity, Doc Ock did just that, becoming known as the Superior Spider-Man. He neutralized many of Spider-Man's nemesis, including the Sinister Six, but his methods, like Kraven's, were also known to be severe and quite violent. Despite all of his heroic acts, Superior Spider-Man eventually gave way to Peter Parker's consciousness, which had survived inside his former body, and Otto made his heroic sacrifice, giving up his own consciousness within Parker's body so that Peter may live on again, and also so that Peter could, save the woman he loved from the Green Goblin, as he knew only Peter Parker could do.
And at number 10, Ra's al Ghul. Ra's al Ghul is an international criminal mastermind, the leader of the League of Assassins, whose aim is to achieve perfect environmental balance for the world, a goal that he thinks he can achieve by eliminating most of humanity, much to Batman's disdain. His MOs usually involve biological weapons or genetically engineered viruses. Aside from his intellectual brilliance, Ra's is a character who can be boasted for his relentlessness, not only through his willpower and resilience, but also through his ability to keep on coming back due to the Lazarus Pits, which have the ability to restore the dead. Ra's attempts to achieve environmental balance go beyond the comics too. Played by Liam Neeson in Batman Begins, he gave the Cape Crusader one hell of a run for his money, and even though he was defeated, his daughter made sure to step up 2 films later and also mess with Bruce Wayne. Up next, number 9, Magneto. Magneto's main ambition has always been to have mutants be the superior race. This stems from a need to protect mutants from suffering a horrible fate at the hands of humans, who often persecute them. This is an entirely rational ambition, minus the whole killing humanity thing. He really does have a point. Magneto was a Holocaust survivor, and his cynical philosophy of achieving peace for mutants derives directly from his past experiences. It also doesn't help that humans have been less than kind to mutants over the years. Magneto feels that achieving the survival of mutants should come at the expense of humanity at large. Otherwise, it's mutants who face extinction, and he just so happens to be the one to usher in that survival. Up next, number 8, Poison Ivy. Created back in 1966, Pamela Isley, aka Poison Ivy, has been Batman's most enduring and cunning female villain to date. Sorry, Catwoman doesn't really count as a villain, let's be honest. Ivy is one of the DC Universe's most notorious eco-terrorists, but she doesn't act out of a desire of creating chaos for chaos's sake. Instead, all of her actions and criminal activities are motivated out of a desire to protect the environment and endangered species, to the point where she regards plant life higher than human life. This irreverence towards human life has made her more of a complex character at times, but also a little full of herself, like many other villains on our list. These days though, Poison Ivy is more of an anti-hero, often teaming up with gal pal Harley Quinn instead of plotting acts of mass eco-terrorism, which is probably for the best. Up next, number 7, Caleb from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I'm sure we can all agree that Nathan Fillion is pretty darn great, and while Joss Whedon didn't get his full run with the actor in Firefly like we all would have wanted, Whedon did get to pop him into one of his other hit shows, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, as Caleb, the creepiest priest who ever did priest, or kill, rather. Caleb is a psychotic serial killer. Once a man of God, now a loyal disciple of the First Evil, who is Buffy's most difficult foe, Caleb is very much aware that he's not the head honcho of Operation Let Evil Consume the Earth, but he sure as hell takes great pleasure in being the vessel for the First, and treats the First as a superior force to God, who he must serve, and murder a bunch of potential slayers while doing so. R.I.P. Xander's eye. Up next at 6, Helmut Zemo. While Zemo's motivations and actions may be a little bit more skewed in the comics, he he's basically a white supremacist, the Zemo that we were given in the MCU actually chases a more noble cause in Captain America Civil War. The character concocts a plan in which he tricks the members of the Avengers to fight amongst themselves, compromising them from the inside out, instead of just blatantly attacking them. It almost works too. Under the ever-present divider that is the Sokovia Accords, Zemo makes it appear that Bucky Barnes has killed T'Chaka, the King of Wakanda, causing conflict between Steve Rogers and Tony Stark, who were already at opposing ends concerning the Accords. This only gets worse when Tony finds out that Bucky was responsible for killing his parents. Zemo's act against the Avengers is out of revenge for what happened during Age of Ultron in Sokovia, the destruction that killed his family amongst countless others. Up next at number 5, Dr. Doom. A complete megalomaniac, Victor Von Doom has always had his heart bent on world domination, but his reasoning is actually pretty solid. Doom believes that under his control, mankind will only benefit, and be the best that it can be. No world hunger, peace everywhere, seems pretty promising. And funny enough, he's actually right, which we've seen on multiple occasions. In Emperor Doom, the graphic novel, Doom gets bored with the world domination that he's achieved, so he just gives it up when Wonder Man challenges him. Another point in history saw him looking into the future, with the one future ruled by Doom being the only one with total peace. And he even proves that he's capable of instigating peace on a not so terrible level, to an extent, in his home of Latveria, where he ruled. He's actually pretty good at ruling, and he clearly knows that he's the one qualified for the job, but just like, maybe don't be so evil about it, Doom. Up next, number 4, Norman Osborn. During the Dark Reign story arc, Osborn saw himself as a savior, which becomes very much apparent during his big monologue at the end of Siege. Osborn was granted some serious power at the end of Secret Invasion, which followed the Skrull invasion of Earth, when he became the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. His reign of terror was prompted by a desire to make the world a safer place, all by not letting anyone just become a superhero. Using the Superhuman Registration Act, he was able to enforce this without having any massive backlash, but was also still pretty evil. Up next at 3, Negan. Negan has always been a mega asshole. Fans of the Walking Dead comics who were introduced to him long before his debut in the Walking Dead television series knew that he was capable of some pretty gruesome stuff, although both TV show and comic managed to depict Glenn's death in a pretty horrific, gruesome manner. Negan was the leader of a group called the Saviors. Yeah, pretty fitting of this list. And the group followed a strict set of rules, making it almost cult-like. Negan himself is a jolly, savage individual who adores mayhem, violence, and manipulation. Despite his fondness for these things, the character firmly believes that the strong are meant to protect the defenseless, and that if they were to give in to harming those who were defenseless, they would be unable to rebuild civilization. Although he is a little hypocritical. Up next, number 2, Thanos. Heads up, MCU spoilers at this number. Although we already kind of spoiled Civil War, but you should have seen that by now. Of course, Thanos has to be on this list. His whole shtick is that by using the Infinity Gauntlet and all of the stones, he will be able to balance the universe, which apparently is done by killing off half of all living beings within it, something that he admits wholeheartedly to Gamora when discussing his intentions with her in the Avengers Infinity War film. It's not just the MCU Thanos that thinks he's saving the universe though. The one in the comics is also convinced that he's doing the right thing, except his motivation is arguably worse. He's doing it in order to get Death, the entity that is, to find him worthy and return his love. The MCU version, at least from what we currently know about Thanos, has not been connected to Mistress Death yet. It fits more so into the villain with a facade of a savior category, especially considering how much he grieved when sacrificing everything he's ever loved in order to get the job done. That being said, in the comics he does conquer a lot for the sake of conquering, although isn't overly great about it. And finally, in at number 1, Ozymandias. The only reason Adrian Veidt tops the Mad Titan on our list is because of how close to home his master plan hits, which is quite literally hitting home in the comics and the Watchmen cinematic adaptation. Dude kills 3 million people in order to achieve world peace. So, for context, Watchmen takes place in an alternate timeline where superheroes emerged in the 1940s, and their presence altered history, leading to the US winning the Vietnam War and having the Watergate scandal never exposed. This timeline has led to a more potent Cold War, in which nuclear war between the US and Russia is inevitable, with only the fiercely powerful Dr. Manhattan in the way of international genocide. Throughout Watchmen, Veidt's motives are uncovered by Rorschach and Night Owl, after the comedian's death has left the former on a hunt to unravel a conspiracy which he initially believes is an attempt to kill off the remaining costume heroes. By the time they catch up with Adrian, he's already executed his plan, to divert the nuclear threat by giving humans a singular cause to rally against. In the comics, a fake alien invasion, and in the film adaptation, against Dr. Manhattan himself, although both plans in the comics and the films involve distracting Manhattan flawlessly. After Adrian carries out his plan, he turns our hero's attention to the news broadcasts airing across the globe, all of which prove that he has indeed prompted global peace, which causes everyone but Rorschach to agree that concealing the truth is the best way to maintain that peace.
Number 10, the Joker. You might be shocked to see the Joker on this list, but in the Joker 80th Anniversary 100-page super spectacular, the Joker actually manages to do something a little sweet for a change. But don't worry, it's only a little sweet. He is on his way to take care of a henchman who failed him by not showing up when he was supposed to, and the Joker actually thinks that this guy may have sold out his plans to the Batman. Not good. However, while on his way to seek revenge, he runs into what he deems as the weird yet wise son of this goon named Sergio. Sergio charms the Joker with his little torture bug box, and Joker discovers that today is Sergio's birthday party when Sergio mistakes him for a hired party clown, but informs him that he doesn't have to actually do anything because no one has come to his birthday party, not even his dad. Oh, that's really sad. Joker thinks that this just isn't right and terrifies the neighborhood families into attending, and promises before leaving to come to Sergio's birthday party every year. Aw, it's kinda sweet. Sure, it was still pretty terrible the way that Joker went about helping, but in the end, I think he sees some of his tormented self in Sergio, and it's kinda cute that this inspires him to try and help the young boy, even if it is in his own, well, twisted Joker-like way. Number 9. MCU's Ghost. In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Ghost is not as mysterious of a figure as their comic book counterpart. When it is revealed partway through the film she first appears in, Ant-Man and the Wasp, to be Ava Starr, the daughter of Hank Pym's former associate. Ava was turned intangible following one of her father's experiments gone wrong, which resulted in an explosion that also claimed the lives of both of her parents. Pym's other former partner, Bill Foster, aka Goliath, took her in and proceeded to try and help cure her of her painful intangibility. This prompted Ava to become the villain known as Ghost, attempting to take revenge on the Pyms who she blames for the death of her parents and her own condition. In the end, however, Janet Van Dyne works to help cure Ava, helping her to realize the error of her ways and to soothe her vengeful spirit, turning Ghost into a more neutral or heroic role, who instead aims to work alongside Hank Pym, Janet Van Dyne, Ant-Man, and the Wasp. Number 8. Carnage. During the events of Axis, Cletus Cassidy had his alignment inverted, turning him into your friendly neighborhood Carnage, a character who now desperately wanted to be good, but basically had no idea how to go about it. After all, Cletus was still a deranged serial killer and as such felt all the impulses of his old self, and had to fight to ignore them. Despite desperately wanting to be good, he was pretty awful at it. Imagine a more insane version of Deadpool, basically. Carnage in fact was even more lost than Deadpool when it came to differentiating from right and wrong. However, he still managed to save the humans of planet Earth from all being murdered when he sacrificed himself to prevent the inverted X-Men celestial gene bomb from exploding and killing everyone who wasn't a mutant. And he did this by wrapping himself around the bomb after Spider-Man was unable to defuse it in time. It was actually kinda sweet. Of course, Carnage didn't end up dying and would later return to us alive and as evil as ever. So don't worry, he wasn't good for very long. Number 7. Sabretooth. I know what you're likely thinking here, Sabretooth, but he's meant to be kind of the worst of the worst. He's feral and bloodthirsty and often kills without any remorse. How could he be a good guy? Well, I would argue that a lot of what makes Sabretooth evil actually has to do with the way that he was raised. He himself could be a hero in another life. In fact, in the Age of Apocalypse universe, he kinda is. AOA Sabretooth ends up working alongside the displaced heroic alternates team known as the Exiles, and Sabretooth was one of the few to stay reversed after the events of Axis, which caused him to continue to push forward with his want to be a hero, following in Wolverine's footsteps. He even became the leader of his own mutant team for a while, Weapon X-Force, and had found love with fellow teammate Monet. Number 6. Dr. Octopus. He might not be a great hero, but even Dr. Otto Octavius has tried his hand at heroics. And Spider-Man actually was responsible for this transformation. Doc Ock's body was failing him and he was about to die, so he came up with the ultimate villainous plot, to steal Spider-Man's body. What he wasn't expecting, however, was to have the consciousness of Peter sway him to change sides as Parker lay dying in Otto's failing body. Spider-Man manages to convince Doc Ock that the world needs Spider-Man, causing Doc Ock to promise that he'll try to be an even better Spider-Man than Peter was. He doesn't end up doing so great though, and in the end he even relinquishes the body of Peter Parker back to Peter's consciousness, who kinda remained within the body in the backseat, even after we thought all of Peter's mind had died within Otto's body. It's a little confusing. Number 5. Dr. Freeze. Freeze being a hero all depends on your perspective really, as so many stories do when it comes to the roles that characters play. And it also kinda depends on which story we're telling. There is a story where Freeze is a man obsessed with a woman who he romanticizes, imagining she will awake from her frozen slumber and fall in love with him, like some sort of twisted Sleeping Beauty plot. However, the story we'd like to focus on, where he is the hero, is the one where he is only turning to a life of crime to help fund a project. However, the story we'd like to focus on, Freeze actually froze his wife Nora in order to cure her from her illness, so his whole freezing thing is all about just taking care of his wife. Number 4. Catwoman. Granted, not everyone thinks of Selina as a supervillain, but that just proves how good she is at, well, being good. When Catwoman was first introduced in the comics, it was as a cat burglar who at that time just went by the name of Cat, and was fond of stealing the money and jewels of the wealthy. Of course, later on, as Selina's story progressed, she would become an even bigger love interest for Batman and Bruce, and would often work with him as his ally, for a time almost permanently seeming to switch sides and becoming more of a hero than anything else. She would later learn, however, that some of her good deeds were not really of her own volition, as Zatanna had actually manipulated her mind, making Catwoman debate whether or not she was ever really good at heart to begin with. I think, however, that Selina has always had that good side to her though, whether or not she is always aware of it. Number 3. Ozymandias. Adrian Veidt actually was a hero for a good amount of the Watchmen story, until, of course, we found out that he's really the mastermind supervillain behind all the schemes and the murder. However, everything dastardly that he does is all for the betterment of mankind on a greater scale. What he's trying to sow with his chaos and crimes is a sense of unity, to make everyone see the importance of peace once more, and to believe in superheroes again. So yeah, I guess there is a bit of an ego included in his plot with, he kinda wants to be the hero. But still, overall, if we were to give Ozymandias any sort of alignment, it would probably be lawful good. Good being the important word there. Sure, his plan didn't exactly turn out the way he'd hoped, and in the end he finds his whole villainous machinations exposed by Rorschach's journals, but hey, he tried. Number 2. Dr. Doom. Remember when Doom was actually the hero of the story? Probably one of his best stories to date was the series featuring Dr. Doom as the infamous Iron Man. During this amazing miniseries, we finally get to see Doom act like the hero he sometimes is in the comics. While he still maintains his ego, just like Doom as a villain, there are many times in the series that he proves that he's kind of earning the right to his ego. Like when a team of his old villainous rivals and sometimes allies gather to discuss the problem of Doom as Iron Man. As a hero, he'd be unstoppable, they surmise, but their theory is if they band together, he won't be able to defeat all of them. Their meeting, however, is interrupted by the infamous Iron Man himself busting in and proving them to be very wrong, as he effortlessly defeats all of them at once. Number 1. Poison Ivy. As far as good intentions go, Dr. Pamela Isley likely has some of the best. Before she was granted her plant-controlling powers, she was labeled a villain just for being an aggressive environmentalist. For her ruthless attitude toward protecting plant life, she was considered a supervillain and an eco-terrorist. But really, Poison Ivy just wants to take care of the planet and its plant life. And when she used her powers to control all of Gotham, things actually proved to be going pretty well under her rule. Although at the cost of free will, of course, so there is that. Number 10. Mr. Freeze. Victor Freeze only became the criminal Dr. Freeze after an experiment went wrong, causing his body temperatures to be lowered, meaning that he always needed to be kept at a colder temperature. As a young man, he was also fascinated by cryogenics, and some stories even getting sent off to boarding school because he froze a cat as a kid to study it. After finding love, his wife Nora is diagnosed with an incurable terminal illness. In an attempt to save her, he aims to cryogenically freeze her until a cure can be found for her illness. There are a few different versions of the way this ends up going for Freeze. He either works to avenge her after she dies in a lab accident, or works to raise money to cure her with his life of crime and his freeze ray. Granted, there is also a storyline where Nora is just a subject that Mr. Freeze becomes creepily obsessed with, but we're not going to focus on that one for the purpose of this list. Just think of Mr. Freeze as someone who does bad things because of true love. He doesn't necessarily want to do them, but he has to. Number 9. Lizard. I actually feel really bad for Lizard. Kurt Connors never intended to become a villain. He was simply working to create a cure for lost limbs by creating a formula that would help them to regenerate or grow back. Unfortunately, the serum he created transformed him into a monster. Many storylines actually paint Connors as a victim more than a villain, a brilliant mind trapped behind the animalistic instincts of a giant lizard. Connors consistently works hard to control his transformations and gain control over his mind while in the lizard form, while continuing to work towards the cure he originally sought while in his human form. Connors' intentions always remain heroic, even when the lizards are very much not heroic. You can't help but feel bad for this man and villain's struggle. At one point, his lizard form and mentality even caused him to eat his own son. Tragic. Number 8. Dr. Octopus. Doc Ock may not always have the best intentions at heart, but as another brilliant mind on the list, he is aimed to do the best he can for others at times, though I will admit that he also often has something to gain from his heroic actions. Take for example his time as Superior Spider-Man. His goals as Spider-Man were noble, but he also took up the mantle so he could escape his failing body, transferring Peter Parker's consciousness into his dying body and leaving him there until it just fully shut down. Granted, he also relinquished Peter's body to a shadow of Peter's former self, which was actually still in his own body, after having some success in his role as Spider-Man, ultimately deciding that Peter was the hero that was truly needed after being defeated by the Green Goblin. Still, his intentions were obviously to be a hero in Parker's stead, and aimed to be an even better one at that, but Doc Ock just couldn't cut it. Number 7. Lex Luthor. Lex Luthor's hatred of Superman may often taint his noble efforts, but there are many times when Luthor has made sacrifices for the greater good. He has teamed up with Superman on multiple occasions to help fight against various enemies, including Doomsday. He even joined the Justice League in the animated series momentarily and helped them defeat the Justice Lords, an alternate version of the Justice League who rule with an iron fist on the world they have come from, where they also killed their version of Lex Luthor. The Justice Lords have come to invade Earth so that they can transform it to mirror their own reality. When the Justice League go to stop them, they appear to be evenly matched against the Justice Lords, and Superman turns to Lex to help him. Lex agrees to do so. He uses an energy disruptor device to take away the Lord's powers and defeat them, and doesn't even turn the device on the League. Say what you want about his hatred of Superman, but Lex often knows when to put the benefits of innocence above his petty feuds. Say what you want about his hatred of Superman, but Lex often knows when to put the benefits of innocence above his own petty feuds. And he's a man of his word, because he promised he wouldn't betray the Justice League. And so he didn't. Number 6. Magneto. Sure, Magneto is sort of a anti-normal humans activist and founder of the Brotherhood of Mutants, but everything he does for the greater good of mutant kind. In fact, he and the heroic Professor X are out to do pretty much the same thing. It's just the way Magneto goes about fighting for mutant rights that makes him a villain. He feels that the only way to get humans to respect mutants' rights is through oppression and fear. In the new X-Men relaunch, House of X, he even works with Xavier to grant mutants freedom through establishing their own nation, nay, their own world. Krakoa. And you should see what is part of their plan together in House of X issue 5. I don't want to spoil it though, so I'll leave it for you to just read. But I will say that when Professor X and Magneto decide to work together, it already makes me see Magneto's intentions as being more noble, more good. If Charles is willing to work with him, then he can't be all bad, right? Number 5. Killmonger. The comics paint another story for N'Jindaka known as Eric Killmonger, who was resentful and felt unwanted. After returning to Wakanda, he appears grateful to T'Challa, but also expresses fear at opening the borders of Wakanda as his king has done. He later seeks to overthrow King T'Challa and rule the world. This last part is similar to Eric's intentions in the MCU though. The cinematic universe paints a nobler version of Eric as a child whose father, T'Challa's uncle, was killed by the former king, T'Challa's father, T'Chaka. Seeking to get vengeance, he returns to Wakanda, who keeps his wealth and resources as a secret from the world. Eric's goal is to take over Wakanda and rule so that he can wage war on the earth in an effort to remove the oppression imposed on African descendants around the world. I mean, war is never a great thing to do, but his goal isn't a bad one. He wants to help other people, feeling that Wakanda is wrong not to have done so in the first place, and was wrong to have abandoned him. In fact, his intentions are considered so great that T'Challa actually learns from this fight over the throne and from his cousin. In the end, he decides it would be best to try and reach out, open the borders of Wakanda, and make an effort to help the rest of the world with their resources, which is also what his girlfriend Nakia was urging him to do in the film, who was actually nothing really like her comic book version. Number 4. Poison Ivy. My favorite eco-terrorist. I've always seen Poison Ivy as having the best intentions at heart. What she wants more than anything is to protect her plants. Unfortunately, the way she sees things, humans and plants just don't get along. And she's not really wrong about that, especially in the modern age. Humans are actually one of the worst things for nature. We cut it down, we choke it with fumes, we tear it up and build condos in a parking lot in a mall. To poison ivy, our very existence threatens that of her and her babies, her little plants. Like any good mother, she just wants to protect them. Sure, if poison ivy has it her way, we won't be around to enjoy the planet, but it will also be kind of happier without us. I mean, at least in her mind. Number 3. Thanos. We are not talking about comic book Thanos here, but instead are turning to look at the MCU Thanos, who does appear to have good intentions at heart. If he has a heart. I don't know. Comic book Thanos wreaks havoc and kills in an attempt to woo Mistress Death, who is Death incarnate but whom Thanos is infatuated with. Or he was. He recently turned her down after she finally decided the pair could be together. Weird. In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Thanos declares he kills to restore balance to the world. He even has that cute and sadistic scene with little Gamora where he explains all this. Remember the one? The one with the blade where they're balancing it? You know what I'm talking about. Ultimately, his home world Titan became overpopulated, and Thanos saw this as the beginning of the end for his people. The planet is now desolate as the civilization seems to have long ago collapsed. In an effort to protect other planets from suffering from the same tragedy, he eliminates half of the population of every planet he comes across. Wanting to make this easier on himself, because, you know, killing that many people is a lot of work, he works to assemble the Infinity Gauntlet, allowing for easier genocidal destruction with a mere snap of his fingers. As much as the heroes protest that this is not the way to go about this, and I do agree, this does seem like a simple solution to kind of a huge problem. Even real-world Earth suffers from overpopulation, after all. Number 2. Ozymandias. A victim of his own ego, Ozymandias worked hard to create a plot that he believed would result in world peace. His plan was brilliant and elaborate, making it look like there was a greater alien threat incoming to band the world together and create peace. The part that makes him villainous is that he kinda put himself at the center of the plan, making it all revolve around him, seeing himself and his plot as the only / best way to save the planet. Adrian Veidt sees superheroes as a huge problem with the world and works to eliminate Dr. Manhattan, who he thinks perfectly symbolizes everything that is potentially wrong with heroes. He also eliminates anyone that gets in his way, killing the comedian and later framing Rorschach in a murder case. His plan even works, killing millions to save billions and end the war. I mean, it works at least for a while. Number 1. Dr. Doom. Victor Von Doom is a genius and insane magic user who rules over Latveria. Beyond that, he has also ruled the Earth before, and even saved it a few times. As a villain, he doesn't seem to be interested in destroying anyone except his foes, the Fantastic Four, and even then, he confines that desire to usually just trying to destroy Reed Richards. He even helps Sue Storm give birth. In truth, his ego is what makes him villainous, and sometimes unsuccessful in his plots. He wants to be adored and just feel that he is better than other people, but often he doesn't show great interest in harming other people. In fact, he wants to prove that he is better often by being a great leader. As much as he despises the Fantastic Four, he even led their team at a time. And the crazy thing about Dr. Doom is he actually is a great leader. When he managed to rule the world for a while, it was peaceful, food was plentiful, and the economy was booming. So while he might not always be the nicest guy in terms of sacrificing individuals' personal freedoms, he sure knows how to make the world a pretty great place for everyone to live in. You just have to be willing to admit that he is the best, bow down to him, and possibly give in to some slight mind control.